I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here I share legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. This is the second video of today. We started out this morning with the Sarah Boone verdict, and I wanted to talk about the Ashley Benefield case. If you know nothing about this case, this has also been called the Black Swan case because she was a former ballerina and she was charged and convicted in the fatal shooting of her estranged husband back in 2020. Ashley admitted to pew-pewing Doug Benefield, he was 58 at the time, alleging that he had harmed her over the 4 years that they were married. She claimed DV. They had a very tumultuous divorce. The courts got involved. And from the time that she got pregnant with their only child together, she said she moved out because she was so sick, but then things started to happen and allegations started to come up. It's my understanding that she alleged that he was trying to poison them, and there were just a lot of allegations. A diagnosis of histrionic personality disorder came up, and during the sentencing that I do not remember coming up during the trial. I did wanna take a look at the testimony of a licensed social worker that spoke at her sentencing. Let's go on ahead and fast forward to this. So Ashley was convicted of manslaughter. Yes. And, this trial just recently happened, and once again, like I said, so the jury did not convict her of second degree, murder. They did feel that the use of force, even though she was afraid, even though she made these allegations that he had hit her, the jury did not feel that her use of force was justified within the situation. Oh, all right. So let's skip ahead to Dr. Barbara Russell, who is a licensed social worker. So I covered her testimony during the trial a little bit more because I'm gonna make myself big for this part. So this doctor allowed Ashley to live with her, and because the prosecution is gonna ask if she's objective, and she's gonna say yes. Um, and so we're just gonna listen and talk. We're just gonna listen to this part. I'm gonna skip ahead to about 20 minutes in. They go through her history, that she's an expert in the area of intimate partner violence, and let's get into her testimony.
Instant response
I need to turn my volume down just a little bit. All right, let's go.
to stimuli immediately after the traumatic event, or is that liable to happen at any time over the spectrum of conditions and circumstances that that individual may experience?
The symptoms can be delayed onset. So somebody can experience a severe trauma in January and perhaps not exhibit any kind of reactivity to stimuli that reminds them of that, or any emotional distress for days, weeks, months, even years later.
So right now, the defense is asking her questions. This is an individual that the defense called to testify about Ashley's mental health because they are asking the judge to downward depart, to give less than the minimum. And yeah.
So it's not unusual to see in November somebody have a problem, or even, again, years later. Delayed onset's common.
So again, using this hypothetical soldier as an example, 3 months after they return home following combat duty, they may not respond to any stimuli, but you're telling us as long
She seemed very disconnected during the sentencing. that was just my viewing of things. This is a difficult moment. This is a difficult time. She just, yeah, that was just my observation. She doesn't really look up at people. She's looking down, and she looks understandably sad to me.
Long as 18 months, 2 years later, when a spoon happens to fall into the garbage disposal and makes a clattering noise and they dive onto the floor, that would not be unusual.
No, it would not be.
Are you familiar, Dr. Russell, with the facts of this case and the circumstances surrounding the shooting?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion as to whether or not Douglas Benefield's conduct contributed to his death?
Absolutely.
Objection and proper opinion.
Overruled.
So the defense just asked if Doug's conduct contributed to his death. And this doctor feels that the shooting, so this doctor clearly feels that it was justified, that Ashley is a victim. This is a case that goes back and forth. So my thoughts on this is I respect the jury's decision. I was not sure what the jury was going to decide because the prosecution, this is the case where the jury had her, sorry, the state had her reenact the shooting, and she looked very terrified. And once again, that possible diagnosis of histrionic did not come into the trial. I am going to play a little bit of Doug's daughter's statement. So he has I believe she's an adult now. He had an older daughter with his first wife, and a lot of things came out about possible jealousy between Ashley and the first wife and the attention that Doug's daughter would get. Now, Ashley was significantly younger than Doug, and their relationship was fast. They met at a political event and they got married very quickly. And it's my understanding that Doug had promised his daughter that he wouldn't remarry but he met Ashley, they fell in love, and once she was pregnant, it's my understanding that that's when things kind of changed between them and, um, things seemed to escalate. And Doug desperately wanted to see his child, and he did want to be with Ashley. And that's where this case was difficult because he did say and do things that seemed a bit toxic or problematic, but from where I was standing, I didn't see or hear anything that justified him being unalived in that moment. That's just my own thoughts. That's how I feel.
Yes, absolutely.
And how so?
Douglas Benefield had a history of violent behavior. Douglas had been threatening Ashley, becoming increasingly aggressive in the weeks and days leading up to the shooting. He had been making verbal threats to her life. He was in her home. He was refusing to leave her home. He was acting in a manner very typical of Doug, only exacerbated at that time.
It's my understanding that this doctor talked to Doug for 90 minutes. Like, so she's only talked to Doug for 90 minutes. And from where I stand, her understanding of Doug is from the reports of Ashley. But she's going to deny that. The state is going to try to push back on some things that I don't think she's going to appreciate, but that's why we're here.
Behaved in a manner that made her feel as though her life was in danger, that she was at serious risk of being killed or being seriously hurt.
Did there come a time, Dr. Russell, when you were approached by representatives of the Manatee County Sheriff's Office who asked that specific question?
Yes.
Did you respond to them with basically the information you've given?
So she is it's my understanding, I think she is giving her expert opinion on PTSD and on Ashley's mental state.
Us here today.
Yes.
Tell us about whether or not you
If you need a good laugh, Uncivil Law did a great video talking about laughing about with Sarah Boone. Like, so if you want to hear his summarized thoughts, make sure to check that out.
have formed an opinion as to Miss Benefield's psychological state at the time of this incident.
At the time of the incident, she was acting under extreme duress. She was in full survival mode, fully believing that her life was in danger. She was responding with an effort to stay alive. There's a process that happens in the human mind when we feel that our lives are in danger. We have to make survival decisions, and these decisions are made in fractions of seconds. Even outside our conscious awareness, we're assessing the situation, assessing our capacity to escape, assessing our capacity to fight back. And people make decisions based on what their survival brain, as I call it, tells them is going to keep them alive. She was doing what was biologically natural in a situation where somebody would feel that their life was in danger. And this was also compounded by the weeks, months, years of knowing Douglas Benefield to be.
This testimony would be more powerful to me if Ashley hadn't come and lived in her home for 8 months. So Ashley lived with this social worker for 8 months after, it's my understanding, after the incident. And I don't, and I'm gonna press play.
Be violent and being afraid of him.
Did you, Dr. Russell, have any opportunities to actually observe Ashley Benefield's reaction around males and the manifestation of this post-traumatic stress?
Now, I do think this next part could be true. I think Ashley might have been a little bit more jumpy, a little bit more so I think this part could be true, but once again, I'm just going to press play.
Syndrome and her comfort level.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
In the weeks, really the early months following the shooting, when Ashley was staying at my home, I would notice in particular, she would frequently apologize for things that didn't require an apology. She especially did that around my husband. If she was in the kitchen making a protein shake in the morning and he came in to make coffee, she always felt like she was in the way. She was always very quick to say she was sorry, to kind of flinch or pull back in a manner that was just completely appeared to be unnecessary.
I did feel that her testimony came across, so that Ashley's testimony did come across as a survivor of trauma, and that she genuinely felt, but like what the law does is it says would someone else in that same predicament, in that same decision, in that same situation, what would that individual do? And I think Ashley felt she had the right to stand her ground, and she's appealing this decision. We will see what happens with the appeals. The defense has made allegations of like some issues with the jury and different things, and so we'll see if she gets a new trial. I wonder if the prosecution will treat Ashley different, or if Ashley will even testify on the stand if she was tried again.
Necessary based on the situation. You know, there was never any indication from him that she was being bothersome in any way, but she had an expectation that she was going to get yelled at or that somebody was going to be mad at her. I had noticed another occasion. My son had stopped by our house in the evening. It was dark unexpectedly. She looked out the window and saw a male figure approaching, and she came.
So, Peppermint, so because it's my understanding that Dr. G does have a license, like that he's a clinical psychologist and that he does forensic work. So it's my understanding Dr. G explains. So you might be talking about Dr. Grande. Are you talking about Dr. Grande, who's I think his degree might I don't know what his degree is in. I'm talking about Dr. G explains. I'm gonna let the video keep going. I like Dr. G explains because he's definitely an expert in psychology.
Screaming through the house saying that someone's here, someone's approaching the house. She was very hyper aroused and reactive to situations, particularly with men.
Your Honor, I don't believe I have any further questions for Dr. Russell.
Cross.
Are you familiar with something called histrionic personality disorder?
Yes.
Can you explain what that is?
Histrionic personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of a person being very melodramatic to gain attention.
And are you aware that the defendant in this case has been diagnosed with that?
I'm aware that that's a false diagnosis, but yes,
So in your opinion, it's a false diagnosis?
absolutely. Women who've been victimized by domestic.
I asked the question.
Excuse me. Excuse me. She's Dr. Russell.
Let her finish. Go ahead, ma'am. You finish your answer.
Yes. Women who have experienced victimization of intimate partner violence are often mischaracterized as being histrionic when the individual assessing them does not have a proper understanding or a complete picture of what has been going on in their lives.
And
So my personal thoughts. I'm gonna give my personal thoughts. So this witness to me, because she's going to be asked directly if she has bias in this case. And I personally, I would never let a current or former client live in my home. There are therapists that do therapy in their house. They normally have like a separate entrance and exit. They normally have certain boundaries around like the other family members don't come into certain parts of the house while they're doing therapy. They have to make sure that confidentiality and all of those things are are set up appropriately. For for me, I personally have an issue with a therapist letting a client live in their home. Like, I know, like, Kurt, what kind of therapist am I? Like, I won't nope. And I've worked with clients that are unhoused, and as a therapist, I have to be careful because there are clients that I have connections with that I care for deeply, but I have to remember because what you do, you can't give a client special treatment. So I could not, um, so there are clients that I would say, "Oh, no." Certain clients definitely could not come and stay with me. So because of that, I have to have the same boundary for everyone. Now, I do let clients call. So my clients have my phone number. If I got a call in the middle of this and if it was an emergency, I would pause my video. I would address the issue, so that's normal, but I just like to clarify what's not normal. Like it's and I've had social workers put in my chat that are licensed social workers that that have question marks about if that would violate certain ethical boundaries. I don't know enough about her board or what her board said is and is not okay. I personally would never go into business with a client. You don't have I I wouldn't meet a client for coffee. It's like a current or former client Now, if I had a client with agoraphobia, severe agoraphobia that struggled to meet out in the world, out in the community, um, we might set up a community session and where I could and maybe, but I'm gonna make it therapeutic. Like that would be treatment. Like it would be understandable why I would meet and they would pay for their coffee, I would pay for my coffee. Like I wouldn't pay for their meal, they wouldn't pay for mine. I have clients that struggle with eating in front of people. So we do it in my office, in my session. I would have them bring their meal and we would sit and I would bring like I would ask, do you mind if I meet? If I eat too in session, and we would meet and we would both eat in session. Like this is why I do this because like it's a no for me because you're always putting your license at risk. Ashley Benefield could, because it's always about protecting the client. Like she could get upset with this doctor and make a claim or make an accusation. And if this person is so traumatized that they can't be around men, now I would set up if they were currently homeless, I would give them resources. I would help them find. I would not pay for the client to stay in a hotel or anything like that because once again, that's not something that I would do for all of my clients. Like there is so many things. Now, there are therapists that attend graduations, that attend weddings. For me, it's a no, just because like now if it's virtual, I might. I look at pictures from weddings because for me, going to a client's wedding, it's like, do I give a gift? Like, do I ask them to not invite me to the reception because I don't want to be asked how I know the person? Like, so it's just I'm weird about that. I do work with clients that live near me. And so we talk about like, hey, if you see me in public here, like if you say hi, I'll say hi, but we're not going to chit chat. Like we're not going to start having a session at the elementary school or anything like that. And so it's just boundaries.
And according to your beliefs, you believe that you do have that background and you are able to diagnose it quickly.
Absolutely.
And would you consider yourself unbiased when it comes to Ashley Benefield and Doug Benefield?
Absolutely.
Okay. So after you had your initial evaluation with Ashley Benefield, that was in, I think, April of 2020,
Correct.
you continued contact with her
Correct.
and she had your phone number
Of course, all of my clients have my phone number.
and she would call you on a regular basis.
She would call me on a regular basis to update me on what was going on in her situation, per my instruction, as there was potentially an upcoming court hearing regarding her situation.
So she evaluated her in April, and this incident happened in November. And then I think it's after this incident that Ashley comes to live in her home for 8 months. That's my understanding of the the timeline. Like I I have questions. I have questions that aren't going to get answered. But the prosecution is asking good questions and to me I have had to testify on behalf of a client that I was that like as a therapist you try your best to make sure like you do your best, but like we're human. And there will be certain clients that you just click with that remind you of somebody. Like there will just be certain clients. And my thing is that I treat everyone the same. Nobody gets different treatment and that I have those boundaries. Um, Nightbot doesn't like more than 3 emojis. I'm sorry, this is Sarah. It's just Nightbot. It's the emojis. It's fine. 2 emojis, but if you do 3, Nightbot will get mad. I might turn that off. I haven't turned it off yet.
And she would copy you on emails to her attorney.
So that is normal. I've had clients in custody issues that I was involved with, and both parents were aware of my thoughts and what I could and could not say. So if there's a parent that I'm not working, like if I'm working with the child, I can't give an opinion on a parent that I haven't met with. Now I can say what the child has told me, which I mean, but like, and what I don't know, like, but I can say that part. I can give my thoughts and opinion on what the child has communicated to me, but I can't give an opinion about somebody that I'm not working with.
Um, I don't know. I don't recall that.
There were several emails that were sent to her family law attorney that had you CC'd on them. Would
Okay.
you, would you agree with that?
That's a real possibility.
So as a therapist, is it normal to have a client CC you on their correspondence with their attorneys?
Yes, if I'm involved in a capacity where I could be testifying at a family law hearing or at an injunction hearing, that's very typical.
Okay. So several months, well, several weeks, I suppose, after this homicide, she moved into your house.
Yes,
And your house, she lived with you, your husband, and your daughter.
correct.
And she lived there approximately a total of 8 months.
Approximately, yes.
And the night that this shooting occurred, you were called on the phone.
I was called by her attorney, yes.
Okay. And you showed up to the house where the murder happened.
Where the shooting happened, yes.
And that's a normal part of being a therapist. You show up at somebody's house when there's.
So I would not, if my client did something, um, now we could schedule an appointment. Like if this happened on a Thursday, we can schedule an appointment for Friday, but I personally am not showing up to the crime scene. Like that's not the type of therapist I am. Like I'm not about that life. I'm not showing up to there. And I think this therapist is the one that said that Ashley never talked with her about like why, I don't know, that never talked about the details of everything. Like and but I'm not gonna show up because if they're not safe emotionally, they need to go to be evaluated. Like if their mental health needs to be evaluated, that needs to be some at the ER or but I'm not showing up to a crime scene after. That's just me. I'm not gonna do it.
Crime.
I have shown up at people's houses, at their place of employment, at a hospital emergency room. Crisis intervention is very much a part of being a mental health professional.
And you,
So for crisis intervention, because if I had a client in this moment that was in crisis, so I personally don't have now maybe this is a concierge business because maybe this is like a home-based concierge therapy because I'm not that's so I have been let me make myself big for this part. So I used to be an intensive in-home therapist where a client could call me right now and I would have to go if I was able, like I would have to, if things are escalated, um I would try to talk to the client on the phone, but where I did have to show up to crisis situations. But that was high risk, normally Medicaid, these were intensive cases, and that was a part of my job. And we defined what a crisis was, what a crisis was not. And if for some reason I couldn't go, then we had the parent would take the child to an ER. If I'm working with an adult that's in crisis, I would have to call. And this, so it never happened this way with an adult. But if there was an adult in crisis and I couldn't go, we normally had these other therapists on call. Somebody would have to go, or we would have to get emergency services out there. So that's where I'm wondering if this is like concierge therapy. Like I'm wondering if this is some like Richard. So I accept insurance. Like, so maybe this is some like concierge thing. Let me look for Bookworm's question. Because somebody said good question. Yeah. So I think I think I don't know. I'm I'm I don't do that.
Know about the demonstrators that were out in front of the courthouse on numerous occasions during this case, correct?
Yes,
Holding signs, free Ashley.
yes, that's the Community Defense Committee called We Stand with Ashley.
Okay.
I'm familiar.
So I did not like the fact that they had Ashley and Doug's daughter, who I think might have been 3 or 4 years old, or maybe 5, I don't know, but, like, young daughter outside holding up signs, like, "Don't," it's I'm giving the gist of it, something like, "Don't lock up my mommy," or something. I don't like it when kids are involved that way. That's my own personal thing. I think the kids should stay safe. I don't think the kids should get involved in that. That didn't feel good to me.
With that.
On numerous occasions, you were also out there holding signs
Yes,
and marching with this group.
yes,
And you still consider yourself unbiased.
absolutely. It's part of my ethical obligation as a licensed clinical social worker to be involved in situations that involve injustice.
Now, if I felt a client was experiencing injustice, okay? So if my client was on trial and I thought my client was innocent, I would not go and hold up a sign. Now, if I chose to anonymously donate some money to a fund or something like, but but so with social workers, it is in their code of ethics to stand up against injustice, but it's like, the isms. So let me pull that up. The social worker code of ethics. Like we have to do this of ethics when it comes to justice. Okay. Um, okay. So I'm gonna share this tab. Okay. So social workers ethical responsibilities. So this is the National Association of Social Work. So it is social workers should promote the general welfare of society from local to global levels and development of people, their communities, their environments. Social workers should advocate for living conditions conducive to the fulfillment of basic human needs and should promote social, economic, political, and cultural values and institutions that are compatible with the realization of social justice. Okay. Public participation. Social workers should facilitate informed participation by the public in shaping social policies and institutions. But this isn't about a specific client. Because that's where a specific client, that's the part where the the boundary becomes murky for me personally. For me personally. Public emergencies. Social workers should provide appropriate professional services and public emergencies to the greatest extent possible. So I volunteer with our state. Um, so there is a state mental health. I don't know what it's called, but if there was an emergency in Virginia, I'm registered to be to respond to that emergency and provide mental health first aid or to help support communities if there was some type of major event. I've never been called on to do that. And during 2020, when things shut down and things were different, I volunteered to give a free therapy session to health workers or to different service providers that were on the front lines. Nobody ever asked for, so I never actually provided that free session, but that was something that I offered. Social and political action. Social workers should engage in social and political action that seeks to ensure that all people have equal access to resources, employment, services, and opportunities they require to meet their basic human needs and develop fully. Social workers should be aware of the impact of the political arena on practice and should advocate for changes in policy and legislation to improve social conditions to meet basic human needs and promote social justice. Social workers should act to expand choice and opportunity for all people with special regard for vulnerable, disadvantaged, oppressed, and exploited people and groups. So that might be what she feels. I'm not sure. Social workers should promote conditions that encourage respect for cultural and social diversity within the United States and globally. Social workers should act to prevent and eliminate domination of exploitation and discrimination against any group, regardless of race, ethnicity, um, all the different isms and abilities. And so I don't know that that applies to a specific client that's on trial. I don't know that that applies.
Now, you said that you were able to diagnose Doug Benefield after a 90-minute phone conversation and I believe you said collateral documentation.
Yes.
And a lot of that collateral documentation a lot of it included the paperwork for these injunctions that Ashley Benefield was trying to get against Doug Benefield, correct?
What do you mean by the paperwork?
The recitation of what Ashley said Doug had done and the things that she was trying to tell the court that.
So this is just going to get into the fact that a lot of the information came directly from Ashley, and she's going to disagree with that. And she's going to say that, no, it came from other sources, but okay.
No, it was what she was reporting to me that he was saying and the messages that she was forwarding, some of which were quite threatening in nature.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay. So I did want to play a little bit of Doug's daughter, Eva. Okay. All right, let's go.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but.
I want you to prepare yourself. We're not going to play all of Eva's statement, but the defense is going to object to certain parts of the statement because they feel like, because there are certain parameters around a victim statement. And so the defense is going to object at times.
I do.
All right, yes, ma'am, if you could please introduce yourself to the court and tell me what you want me to know.
I'm Eva Benefield, Doug's daughter. When my dad moved from Charleston to Florida, I was a little over 18 years old and preparing to go to college. He was on the road a lot, and I would occasionally see him when he passed through South Carolina on his way up north. Although I did not get to see him as much as I liked, he was always a text or a phone call away. After my mom died, my dad knew it was important for him to answer the phone as soon as he could. He was out of town when she passed, and I had been trying to call and text her after school for what felt like hours of waiting in the carpool pickup line. After finding her later that evening, any time my dad didn't answer, it sent me into a spiral. My brain automatically went to the worst possible outcome, thinking something terrible happened. My dad's colleagues can attest to the fact that even if he was in the most important meeting of his life, when I called, he would step out immediately and let me know that he was in a meeting and he would call me back as soon as possible. My dad usually woke up in the very early hours of the day. The first thing he sent me was always a Bible verse followed by, "Good morning, pumpkin." This was his way of letting me know that when he was awake and he was available for me to call him when I woke up and tell him about the day I had ahead of me. The morning of September 28th, I woke up to no messages from my dad. I wasn't alarmed quite yet. Sometimes he rushed to the gym or had to immediately get to his computer for work. As the morning droned on,
Sorry, so maybe this happened in September and not November. I was trying to find when it happened. And so this was published in November. I thought, because I thought she was saying September. Okay, so yes, so it happened around 7 p.m. on September 27th. All right. So that's when the incident happened. September 27th of 2020.
I anxiously awaited a phone call or a text message from him. Around lunchtime, I began Googling about traffic accidents in Sarasota, Florida. My friends told me, I told my friends I was worried, and they let me know I had nothing to worry about, that my anxiety-ridden brain was just flocking to the worst possible outcome. 9:24 a.m. Good morning. 10:42. Hello. 10:43. You're kind of scaring me. 11:20. You should definitely text me so I know you're okay. 11:48. I'm about to text Ashley. 11:49. Just kidding, I don't have her number. 12:03. This is freaking me out. 12:55. Please, please, please answer. 12:56. Great, now my texts aren't going through. 12:57. I hate this so much. It was about an hour later that I received a phone call from my uncles that my
So this was heartbreaking to me, finding out that his daughter didn't find out about everything until later. And so Kate, so where I am, in order to call yourself a psychologist, you have to be licensed as a psychologist. It's my understanding that she is licensed as a social worker. So some people can have a doctorate and have a doctorate in social work, and that would be different from psychology. So it's my understanding. So I think she does have a doctorate, and but it's my understanding that Dr. Is it Russell, that she is licensed as a social. So she has her PhD, and she's licensed as a social worker. She is not licensed as a psychologist. Okay.
dad had been shot the night before. Is he okay? I asked. My uncle responded with a hesitant no. My next question before hanging up the phone was, she did it, didn't she?
And that's sad too. Like as soon as finding out that her dad was deceased, she immediately thought that Ashley had done something to him. Like that's just so sad.
Ashley, since the day you shot my father, I have only had one question to ask you. Why? Why did you end my dad's life knowing he was my only living parent and the only person I could confide in and count on for everything I needed as I turned into a young adult? Why did you willingly take away your daughter's father, knowing the consequences of your actions would leave her without either parent to help her navigate through her own life? You somehow managed to orphan not one, but two young girls. Unlike Emerson, I am fortunate enough to have known my dad for a full 19 years before you ended his life. He taught me how to paint. He attended every extracurricular activity I had.
And so if I have the full link to this down in the description, if anybody hasn't watched everything, the defense is going to argue that Ashley should get a lower sentence because of the PTSD. The state is, of course, going to feel that no, that the that she should not get a lower sentence, and then the judge is going to make some statements. I do like Matt, so it's Judge White. I like his rulings. Like I think he's been a pretty fair judge from what I saw. I did not watch every moment of this, but I thought that he had been pretty fair to both sides. I thought.
This cannot be imposed. All right, so the first thing we need to do is talk about the bases that have been argued for downward departure. And I think today it's an absolute tragedy that we're even here today. And I often, in these situations, sit back and wonder, how did we get here? How did life bring us to this point, not only here in court, but between the Benefields? I think.
So y'all know my brain works at a faster speed, so I'm gonna speed it up to about 1.25. Okay. If you ever want to slow it down, there's like a little, but I'm gonna speed it up just a little. If it starts going too fast, I will slow it down.
Both sides have acknowledged, because both the defense, Mr. Taylor, and the state talked about lenses and perspectives. And I think this is a good example of exactly that, where whatever lens you view this case from can really affect how you view the players, the results, the participants, and the outcome. So we've got the score sheet to start from. The issue is whether a downward departure has been sufficiently, the burden of proving that has been sufficiently met, and then whether the court would grant a downward departure. So the bases are, I'm going to just take them in alphabetical order from the statute, 921.0026 subsection 2. The first one is D. The defendant requires specialized treatment for a mental disorder that is unrelated to substance abuse or addiction, or for a physical disability, and the defendant is amenable to treatment. In that particular one, there was the testimony by Dr. Russell that she has diagnosed the defendant with PTSD. It's a complex trauma. She explained the genesis of it and how she reached that conclusion. But importantly, what needs to flow from that is a description of what that specialized treatment is, what sort of treatment is important or would be necessary to treat that PTSD, inpatient, outpatient, what kind of mental health therapies, and so forth. So,
because there are a lot of people in jail that have PTSD. Like now, trauma does not justify. So there are lots of people that have PTSD. So the majority of people with PTSD are not incarcerated, but there are a lot of people that are incarcerated that have had horrific childhoods, that were like that have had things happen. And to me, it's our choice to respond, get treatment, get help, and that's why I advocate for healing and addressing those things and getting help and support. One of my favorite therapists that testified during the main trial was one of the marriage therapists that was like, I did not understand why either one of them wanted to remain in this relationship, because it did sound toxic. Didn't sound good.
so based upon the competent and substantial evidence that has been presented, I do not find that D has been proven by preponderance of the evidence, all the elements of D. F, the victim was an initiator, willing participant, aggressor, or provoker of the incident. The reason I asked that question and I was looking around is I had a case and I thought I put it in my packet for today, but I'm not seeing it. There was actually a decision in the Florida Law Week.
And if you follow, because that's Jules over in the left-hand corner. So Jules reports on different cases. And so, hi, Jules.
Within the past couple of months, it hasn't been too long ago, where that very issue was discussed. And the DCA in that case actually came down and said, when it talks about the incident, the evidence must support that the victim was an initiator, willing participant, aggressor, or provoker of the incident. And specifically said the court should not consider all of the pre-existing or attendant circumstances and just look at that incident. I think both sides took a great amount of time throughout this case to talk about incidents and events and happenings that occurred before September 27th of 2020. Do I have the date right? September 27th of 2020. But I think the case law talks about that particular day or that particular event. And it doesn't need to be, for this downward departure basis, the law is very clear. The defense doesn't have to prove it by clear and convincing evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. They don't have to prove or provide evidence that is beyond a reasonable doubt. The question is there competent and substantial evidence that in the incident itself, the victim was an initiator, willing participant, aggressor, or provoker of the incident? And quite frankly, the evidence, the preponderance of the evidence has established that Ms. Benefield's testimony is sufficient in and of itself. And I understand the state is arguing that to discount her credibility, but is there evidence in the record that proves by a preponderance that Doug Benefield was an initiator, willing participant, aggressor, or provoker of the incident? And there is. That was the entire basis of the self-defense argument. So I do find that the requirements of F have been met. G, the defendant acted under extreme duress or under the domination of another person. This is why I was asking about the case law, because I have not seen this particular statute.
So the judge is going through a lot of the law with what, and the judge is aware that an appellate court might disagree with his decision, and that'll be up to the appeals side. He ruled as best he thought.
Statutory basis applied in this particular factual scenario where it's argued that the defendant acted under the extreme duress of the victim as a self-defense matter. But just because I haven't seen the case law doesn't mean that it doesn't exist and it can't be argued for those or that purpose. So for the purposes of today, using a similar analysis as I did under F, but also considering the past relationship between the parties, I think there has been competent, substantial evidence to establish by a preponderance that the defendant acted under extreme duress. The domination of another person, I just don't think fits. So to the extent that that particular downward departure basis requires that the duress come from a conspirator, a co-conspirator, a confederate, or a principal, I could be wrong, but I think it applies, and I'm applying it here. Or I think it's been proven. And then J was the offense was committed in an unsophisticated manner and was an isolated incident for which the defendant has shown remorse. The case that I talked about a few minutes ago regarding victim was an initiator, willing participant, aggressor, or provoker of the incident. J has similar language. The offense was committed in a sophisticated manner. So I understand the state's argument saying, hey, this was a whole series of events and was very sophisticated in its planning and execution. At the end of the day, the statute itself says the offense was committed in an unsophisticated manner, isolated incident for which the defendant has shown remorse. So if I look at just the incident itself, there's nothing sophisticated necessarily about self-defense and using self-defense. Isolated incident, the defense has pointed out, and the score sheet shows there are no prior acts of violence, there's no prior convictions. The case law requires, though, that all three elements of this be established. The final one is the defendant has shown remorse. Obviously, she's exercised a very, very fundamental constitutional right by not making a statement to
So Ashley did not make a statement during the sentencing, and the judge is saying that like that isn't weighing in to his decision.
today. But I can also, I believe, consider the testimony that was provided during the trial. And remorse is not necessarily, it doesn't have to be, I'm sorry I did this. Because someone is perfectly entitled to maintain their innocence, even in light of a verdict of guilty by a jury. So I find that during the trial itself, that Ms. Benefield did demonstrate remorse for this entire incident happening and the culmination and the resulting death of Mr. Benefield. So I do find that J has been established. The non-statutory bases, there were none explicitly argued, but I'm going to make a ruling on the individual and culmination of errors for appellate purposes. Again, I'm not aware of any case law that establishes that. To the extent that there's an argument to be made that, and when I say individual errors, I'm talking about fundamental error, right? Because that could just be one thing and fundamentally vitiates the fairness of the entire trial. So individual or cumulative errors being the bases of a downward departure, I'm going to go ahead and make the finding that those are not, errors by the trial court are not bases for a downward departure, non-statutory.
All right. So Forever Zennial, I like this statement because imagine if Sarah Boone didn't make a statement yesterday, maybe she wouldn't have gotten life. I think Judge Kranek, whether she made a statement or not, because Sarah Boone has submitted so many letters and had engaged in such egregious behavior that, in my personal opinion, proved that she had not changed. If she was in a similar situation, I think, especially if she was intoxicated, I think the same thing could happen again. And so I think that's what, and she had options to save the court, the family from the trial, because she could have taken the plea and she decided not to. And so she knew she was facing life and she decided to try to get a not guilty, and that did not happen. And I think she wanted her day in court. I think she wanted to get up and testify and do what she did. Yeah.
Statutory bases.
I'm talking about Sarah Boone. We're getting back to Ashley.
I may be wrong. We'll find out. The second part of the analysis is whether the court is going to exercise its discretion to depart. And that's where you really take into consideration those factors in determining, in light of all of the facts and evidence that have been presented, if this is a case that the court believes a downward departure should be granted. And as I said, I understand completely that two sides of this room are viewing this same case through very different lenses. As I consider all of the evidence that I talked about earlier that I reviewed in preparing for today, the jury's verdict which they did not find Ms. Benefield guilty of the charged offense. It was a lesser included offense that did not include depraved mind. It included doing an act which resulted in the death of another person.
So manslaughter. So she was not convicted of second degree. She was convicted of manslaughter.
I consider the score sheet and what Florida statute or chapter 921 discusses regarding the aim of sentencing, that being the primary purpose of sentencing is to punish, the secondary purpose is to rehabilitate. The PSI, which has been reviewed and considered, and I understand throughout the arguments that the defense has raised their disagreements. For what it's worth, the PSI in the factual part really just recreates or retypes the complaint affidavit. I don't really put a lot of weight on that. I don't need that because I presided over the entire trial. So I don't put a lot of weight on the factual recitation that was in the PSI. And as we all know, the PSI is not controlling on the court. The probation officer who does the report makes a recommendation, but unlike
So I don't know what the recommendation was in the pre-sentence investigation. I don't know what that recommendation was, but the judge is saying that he's not bound to it. Let me know if y'all have general questions. Remember, I'm not a lawyer. This is from a psychological perspective.
in juvenile court, where the Department of Juvenile Justice's recommendation is somewhat binding on the court, the DOC recommendation is not, but I did review that. And of course, as I said, I reviewed the defendant's sentencing memorandum, all of the various attachments, and listened to the statements that were made today from Dr. Russell, as well as David, Wes, Tommy, and Eva Benefield. And all I can say is thank you to everyone who took the time to write a letter and share your experiences. A number of them talked about growing up with Ms. Benefield, their interactions with her as they've grown up and growing in.
So I just wanted to clarify. So the judge was just saying that he's not bound to the recommendation, that in juvenile court, whatever recommendation comes from the PSI, they have to stay, like they have to do that recommendation. And the adult court, it's a recommendation, but like the judge doesn't have to do exactly what it says, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's a whole thing. It just gives more information, but yeah.
Into adulthood. Thank you for the statements regarding your relationships with Douglas Benefield and how his loss has impacted each of you. So when I look at the bases for the downward departure and I consider all of the facts and evidence that have been presented to me, my ultimate conclusion, Ms. Benefield, is that this is not a downward departure case. So with that said, the sentence of the court will be as follows. I'm going to sentence you to 20 years in Florida State Prison. That's to be followed by 10 years of probation.
She really didn't have a reaction. Let me see. Florida manslaughter. What was she facing? Florida manslaughter sentence. I'm just Googling it. So remember, okay. Ooh. So, okay. It looks like it's up to 30 years. I guess that's what the range from 15 to 30, it looks like, based on my non-lawyer Google.
Upon your release, and the Florida State Prison was, of course, with all credit for time served. You must initially report to the Bradenton Department of Corrections. We'll be able to provide you a map of where that is. Cost of supervision will be a condition of supervision. Based upon the testimony of Dr. Russell today regarding you suffering from and being diagnosed with PTSD, the court is going to order as a condition of your probation that you obtain a mental health evaluation at your expense within 60 days of beginning your probation. You're to complete any recommended treatment, including residential treatment and aftercare, if it's recommended, on the first attempt at your expense. You're to provide proof to your probation officer regarding the evaluation, participation in, and completion of that treatment.
So she was sentenced to 20 years and an additional 10 years of probation with a mental health evaluation and treatment that she'll have to pay for. The state is going to ask that the previous doctors, I think the state specifically didn't want the Dr. Russell to be her provider in the future, because I think the state really does feel like the people that were involved did not get a good sense of what was going. I don't know. The state wasn't happy. So the state was going to ask that it not be one of the doctors that was involved with this case. And the judge is going to say she can pick who she wants. So whoever she decides to go with upon release, she can get an evaluation with that person. This case was a hard one. Um, I don't know if there were any letters that were submitted. When I go back and look at it, Dr. Russell spoke. Um, David Benefield is the victim's brother. So I think it was only Dr. Barbara Russell was the only one that spoke in court. There may have been letters that were submitted. When is Melody sentencing? I did cover that case a little. When is she going to be sentenced? So depending on what comes up, and especially if she says something, oh yes. So the Melody Ferris case, um, do I have that on my calendar already? Because I know Chloe, no, that's next week. So Chloe Driver is next Thursday. I do not have this one. Okay, so tomorrow. All right. So if I cover it, it would probably be Thursday. But I need to take a look at it and see if there are any questions about it or if there's any thoughts I have about it. Ooh. Did you get a sense of a power imbalance in her relationship with Doug? And my sense, so I'm sharing my thoughts. I thought that with the child, I think she no longer wanted to be with him. And I don't think she wanted him to be a part of her and her daughter's life at all. But it would be up to the courts. And there was no evidence because she made claims of SA against the child. Like she made claims that he was poisoned. There was no evidence that I saw that he was harmful towards children. I was not aware of anything. And somebody thinks it might be the fifth for Ferris. So y'all let me know in the chat. But with this case, I think sometimes within religious communities, there can be this submission thing that can get caught up in that somebody that is not safe and is toxic can use submission to I make all the decisions. And so sometimes within religious groups, there can be like, there can be some interesting things. And I am a Christian. I am a part of a religious group, but my husband does not tell me what to do and what not to do. So we have conversations. My husband is a partner. Now I wanted to buy a gold couch. I really and the couch is beautiful. I think I've shown y'all a picture of the couch before. I love this couch. If my husband had said, I hate it, it cannot come into our home, I would have been respectful. Like we would have, okay, well, what about this color? Like I would have had a conversation with him about it. Thankfully, I'm married to somebody that doesn't try to use control, that doesn't try to use those things. Um, so I personally don't see similarities between. So Sarah Boone comes off very narcissistic to me. I thought it was interesting that histrionic personality disorder came up with Ashley. I know Dr. Russell did not believe that she had it, but with histrionic personality disorder, some of the features are attention seeking, unstable emotions, distorted self image, overly close relationships where they believe relationships are closer than they actually are, blaming others. So people with histrionic personality disorder may blame their own failure or disappointment on others, and a low frustration tolerance or delayed gratification. So they have trouble waiting. They have like little things can cause major emotional dysregulation, major emotional issues. And so I thought it was interesting that that particular diagnosis came up. So I personally didn't see um in anything like that, those types of similarities. Um, I think Sarah's big issue was also alcohol. I think it was alcohol, and I think Ashley wanted to be with her Her husband. All right. So, Dr. B, have you resigned yourself to the fact that Sarah Boone has narcissistic personality disorder? So, the experts only diagnosed her with features. I think we saw a few more. I think we checked off a few DSM-5 criteria in the prosecution's rebuttal. So, I can't diagnose people. If I were to assess her, I'm pretty sure we would get to that particular diagnosis. I'm pretty sure. And so, yes, yes, yes. All right. Yeah. My heart goes out to the children involved in this case. I'm glad it sounds like Eva has, yeah, that's the oldest, that Eva has a good relationship with her uncle, that her family has come alongside her. An issue with her social media came up because I think she talked about something related to the trial online, and that became to be an issue in court. And so that's where sometimes prosecutors have to remind people that are on social media, be careful what you post. So I'm careful with personality disorders. So I do use the PAI, so the personality assessment inventory. I use the PAI. I typically um I'm careful with diagnosing personality disorders because they're really hard to get rid of. I will mention features, I will mention traits. I have diagnosed borderline personality disorder. Normally, with narcissism, the individual doesn't come for treatment or come for an evaluation. So I've never diagnosed narcissistic personality disorder, but I've worked with children of narcissists a lot. Like that's a and spouses of individuals with narcissistic traits. Like based on what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, and the interactions that I have with the individual, there are some pretty clear signs of that. And so I need to go feed my kiddo. I appreciate you all. Thank you for watching. If we are on our road to 30,000, okay, let me check my stats. Did we reach 30,000? Let me see. Well, exactly. So nobody like everybody has to stay. Okay. So you can come and go as you please, but let me make it a ticker. How do I know there's a way for me to do this. Let me go to live total. It's over here. Where is my live? Okay, I need to go feed my kid. We hit 30,000. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate each and every one of you. I hope y'all have a good one. Bye.